The climax of Batman Arkham Origins is one of the most action-packed in the Arkham series. It sees Batman fail to protect his home, revive his butler turned father, and throw himself into the never-ending inferno that is Blackgate Prison. As the story nears its ultimate conclusion, Batman is forced to do battle again with Bane, one of his smartest, most physically opposing foes. And as the pair come to blows for the final time, against the clock, Batman manages to put him down. The issue is, Bane loses his brains here. The drug he took to become this big hulking behemoth, TN1, has permanently given him the lowest intellect imaginable. This means that by the time we see Bane again in Batman Arkham Asylum, he's essentially dumbed down into something of the human equivalent of a very heavy rock, in that he's not smart, not very useful, but if you threw him at someone, it would definitely hurt the person on the wrong end of him. So, before we get into this, to kick off our little series over here on the Charles Cardy channel, Arkham Elseworlds, let's give a little rundown of what this series actually is. It's a new series where you could send in your best Arkham-based what-if scenario, and I'll have some fun with it, write it, and expand upon it in ways which might shock you. Most of these ideas aren't where I'd actually want the series to go, but more fun little Elseworld stories that let me mess with the Arkhamverse that we all know and love. Before we get into it though, subscribe. We're so close to 25,000 subscribers, and it would be awesome to hit that, and let me know any ideas you have down below for the next episode of Arkham Elseworlds. And without further ado, how would the Arkhamverse have changed if Bane didn't lose his memory? Today we'll be diving into Earth 7719, an alternate Arkham timeline where, following the events of Arkham Origins, Bane would fully recover and ultimately regain his memory of Batman and everything he learned about him during the time period before their big blowout fight at Blackgate Prison. So, our story starts after the events of Arkham Origins. Joker is arrested following his takeover of Blackgate, and Bane is taken back into custody, still recovering from his fight and TN1 overdose. During the time it would take for Bane to recover, Batman would still be growing as a crime fighter. He'd still be learning and figuring out how to deal with all of his villains should they ever break out and come after him, and obviously this includes Bane. Batman goes through the events of Arkham Shadow, and ultimately he'd recruit Dick Grayson to be the first Robin. Batman and Robin would fight crime in Gotham for months, and Dick Grayson would learn under Bruce, taking down villains like Calendar Man, an emerging Victor Zsasz, and a newly minted Two-Face. Reports would flood in that Joker had broken out of Blackgate, and according to reports, he would have committed various small-time crimes, leading Batman to believe Joker had lost a step. However, one night while on patrol, a call would come in from a concerned citizen that an apartment complex in Gotham had been spewing out gusts of green and purple smoke. We cut to the Batcave, an interaction between Alfred and Bruce, where they'd hear of this incident, and they'd both acknowledge it was probably Joker's doing, and as Bruce would suit up, Alfred would ask him to leave Master Grayson here, let him train. He isn't ready for someone as unhinged as the Joker yet. Bruce tries to tell Alfred he needs to take Robin with him, but Alfred just tells him he can't. Not right now, not this early in his career. He doesn't know the Joker. Batman says that no one knows the Joker, but ultimately agrees, calling Dick over. He tells Dick to stay in the cave tonight and train. Bruce continues and tells Dick he'll stay here, he'll help Alfred should he need it, and he'll brush up on some of the more serious criminals in Gotham. Zsasz, Enigma, the Joker himself, the sorts of criminals you can't prepare enough for. Grayson obviously gets a little bit upset about this and tells Bruce that he isn't a kid, he can handle whatever is out there, but Bruce puts his foot down and tells him he's off duty until he's cleared this mess up. Dick further inquires as to what he means by quote-unquote this mess, and Bruce stops. He turns to Dick and tells him it's the Joker. It has to be. Dick says he can handle some clown in a suit, and Bruce says that he can't. He doesn't even know if he can. They've fought twice, and both times it's like a new type of depravity. He wants Dick to help, but not with this. This needs to be done precisely. Dick says he understands, and the pair shake hands. They are father and son, even if only for a few months at this point. They're still family. Bruce puts his cowl on, jumps in the newly built Batmobile, and speeds out to the crime scene. He gets to the scene, and the GCPD have cornered it off and evacuated all of the people living in the apartment building. Batman asks Jim Gordon, now the new commissioner, what he's seen, and Gordon tells Batman that they haven't sent anyone in. No one wants to go in. Batman says he does, and he grapples up to the roof of the complex and begins making his way down the 2 stories to the room, which is filled with gas. He gets there and checks the door for traps and makes his way in with a gas mask on. Batman opens the door and tests the gas. It's dyed zinc chloride. It's harmless, annoying, thick, but ultimately harmless. It isn't laughing gas. Not like the laughing gas Joker used at Blackgate. Batman notes this and eventually clears the gas out of the window. When he turns around, he sees a message scribed onto the wall. It reads, El Payaso ha muerto. Batman takes a step back and he radios through to Alfred, frantically, almost scared. He yells at him to lock Wayne Manor down, to take Dick and get in the cave now. Alfred urges Bruce to calm down and asks him what's happening, and Batman turns, looks at the etching on the wall, and tells him he thinks Bane is back. He smashes out of the window and tells Gordon it's safe, before zipping off in the car. On the drive to Wayne Manor, he relives the last time Bane went after his family. He nearly killed Alfred, he nearly burned the cave to the ground, and he begins feeling that feeling of failure again. Not again though, he can't let this happen again. Not with Dick in the house, not with Alfred in the house. He steps on the gas and speeds through Gotham streets. He makes it to the cave, the car parks, the elevator takes him down as the lake next to the mansion makes itself whole again. He jumps out of the car and the cave is absolutely fine. Alfred and Dick are cleaning and training respectively, and Batman asks Alfred if he's locked the cave down, and he says he has. He's pretty confident about that. Batman takes his cowl off and sits at the Batcomputer, reliving the first sighting of the message he saw on the wall, El Payaso ha muerto. Alfred walks up behind him and says the clown is dead. He says this in his dry English tone, almost to tell Bruce that, yes, he can read Spanish. Bruce confirms that yes, according to this, the Joker is dead, but how and why? Bruce tells Alfred to keep an eye on the GCPD comms because he has some work to do. He leaves the cave again, this time heading to Blackgate Penitentiary. He makes his way through the ever so familiar halls until he reaches a group of EMTs and guards huddled around a cell. As they're made aware of Batman's presence, they part and let the Dark Knight into the cell, and Joker is dead. His back was broken, a disgusting, wretched smile etched into his face. His teeth were stained by blood. None of this mattered though, because the point was, Joker was actually dead. Bruce scans his body and finds traces of a prototype version of the Titan formula we see in Arkham Asylum. It was definitely Bane. No one else is smart enough and strong enough to do this, to kill the Joker by snapping his spine and then cover up his murder just until the moment he wanted Batman to find out that the Joker was actually dead. Bane is tying up loose ends and taking names. Batman takes one last look at Joker and leaves. He radios through to Oracle, who almost seems surprised to hear from him. He tells her to check the last known location of Bane. His cell, his last breakout attempt, something, just anything they have on Bane. Oracle says the last file they have on Bane places him in cell M43, maximum security, specifically the underground maximum security. Bruce heads off and goes underground. It's dark, the screams from inmates build the tension. He passes various well-known criminal cells until finally arriving at Bane's cell. Batman burns the lock on the cell, and there's no Bane. What he does find though is a camera setup and a monitor. A monitor feeding live footage directly from Wayne Manor. Not the Batcave, Wayne Manor. Batman looks at it, knowing it can't be real, it can't be live, this has to be some sort of sick joke. But that illusion is shattered when he sees Dick walking through the halls, wearing the same outfit he was wearing when Bruce left the cave. Batman would grab the drive from the monitor and smash it, watching the feed trickle out of existence as he stands up and leaves. He once again heads back to the cave. He tells Alfred and Dick what he found. He confirms that the Clown Prince of Crime is dead, but what he can't confirm is where Bane is, what his plan is. Months pass, criminals are put away, Bane isn't found, and Bane isn't even heard from. Wayne Manor is put on lockdown and security is raised to the nth degree. Batman and Robin continue operating in Gotham for months without fault. They begin working in tandem, beautifully, but the whole time, Bane is out there and everyone knows it, but no one, not Batman, not Oracle, nobody, has seen him or heard from him. We jump forward in time and Bruce and Dick are being run ragged. The city has hit all-time highs of crime from costumed criminals. Blackgate, in its final few months, and the newly opening Arkham Asylum had had a surge in breakouts. Criminals like Killer Croc, Mad Hatter, Black Mask, the Penguin, the Riddler, and Two-Face had all broken out in the last couple of months, with seemingly bigger schemes than ever, more funding, more weapons, and bigger crews who were more ruthless than usual. The Mad Hatter had recently been caught kidnapping blonde women from a local modelling agency determined to find his Alice. Black Mask had made an attempt to rebuild what was left of his crumbling empire, and Batman and Robin had even stopped Killer Croc and Penguin from killing one another following some gang-related dispute. The Riddler, formerly Enigma, had been caught in the act of sending riddles out in envelopes to people in Gotham, and if they didn't solve them in time, gas would disperse from the envelope and the recipient would die. Two-Face had been robbing more banks than ever. Millions of dollars of Gotham's dirty and clean money respectively had been quote-unquote deposited into the Bank of Dent. He only took half though, the other half was missing. Nowhere to be found, untraceable by even the combined efforts of the world's greatest detective and the GCPD. The dynamic duo were truly in full swing, and the city, although being full of crime, had never been more hopeful, which for a city like Gotham was something of a sign from God that perhaps a brighter day was just around the corner. They would both be tired and both be questioning the effect they were having, but they had each other. They had Alfred, they had Oracle, and as long as they could stand, they would fight for Gotham. Dick would complain that he was tired, that he couldn't carry on anymore, but Bruce would tell him it's here where he needs Robin more than ever. He needs Dick Grayson more than ever. He can't do this alone. Batman and Robin would be alerted to a crime in Old Gotham. A heist by a pair of unknown criminals. The duo would arrive and find two men stealing weapons from the back of a truck. They drop down and begin putting belt to ass. Bruce and Dick take the pair down. They were effective, but still slower than usual. They'd been pushed to their absolute limits these last couple of months, and they'd realise this when even two low-level robbers would make them sweat. This would be shown when Dick is nearly shot by one of them, but Batman manages to grapple the gun out of the man's hand. Ultimately, they'd take the pair down. They'd ask who they were, and they'd say they were called Trog and Zombie. Then they'd just start laughing. Dick would ask why they were laughing. They'd just gotten their ass kicked. Trog would say he knew who they were, and Zombie would pipe up and say they were so screwed. The duo would look at each other and ask what the two criminals were stealing. Turns out they'd been stealing high-grade explosives, but the pair of thugs would say it didn't matter, they already had enough. Batman and Robin had fallen into their trap, and now they weren't at home, and now it was over for them. Robin would talk to Batman away from the scene and ask them what they meant by they weren't at home. And Batman would have a very bad feeling. He'd radio through to Gordon to tell him to send a SWAT car out to pick these two thugs up. He'd then radio through to Alfred. The connection would drop. Nothing. The radio lines were closed. The channel didn't exist anymore. Bruce furrows his brow, and that sinking feeling in his stomach just gets worse. He grapples up to the top of a nearby building with Robin close behind him. He'd look over to Wayne Manor, and smoke would emerge from over the horizon. Bruce would jump back down and scream at Dick to get in the car, and they both get in the car and try to contact Alfred again, but alas, no answer. On the way back, Bruce would have flashbacks to Bane's incursion on the cave all that time ago. Alfred nearly died, not again. He cannot let this happen again. Bruce tells Dick to be ready and Dick asks for what and takes his mask off. Bruce says he doesn't know what they're driving into, but he knows it won't be nice. He needs Dick to be relentless and fast, but also safe. He continues on that he's proud of him for the man he's become, for the people he's saved, and for not going down the same path Bruce did, the path of vengeance. Dick is visibly moved by this and says thank you and puts his mask on, and the Batmobile speeds back through Gotham faster than it ever has, Bruce driving like it's a matter of life or death, and well, it is. They pull up to Wayne Manor. Bane. Bane stands atop the steps to the manor, and Batman gets out of the car. Bane tells Bruce he shouldn't have brought the boy, but Bruce says Bane is a hollow shell of what he was, and Bane tells Batman that he's far from that. He's better than ever, he's smarter, he's stronger, he's had more time to study Batman and his new partner, and he will dismantle them both. He then says that he owns Gotham. He says this crime wave was down to him, he broke the criminals out. Joker's death and fake breakout. He gave the underworld the funds, he orchestrated this whole thing. He had to kill the Bat, it was his destiny. He brought the Dark Knight and Boy Wonder to their knees, and his childhood fears of the Bat creature were about to be brought to an end on his own burning doorstep. Bane signals, and two of his men bring Alfred out of the manor at gunpoint, the manor slowly burning behind him as Alfred is brought out, beaten and broken. He manages to repeat the words he spoke to Bruce the first time Bane broke him. He tells Bruce to not add him to the weight that he carries. Bane picks Alfred up by the head and he tells him he wasn't going to let him go this time, and he picks him up and snaps him over his knee, killing Alfred. Batman and Robin scream in anguish, seeing their father and grandfather killed in front of them and thrown aside like a sack of meat. Dick sheds a tear and he gets very angry, but he doesn't rush in. He throws a smoke bomb to disorientate Bane, and himself and Bruce move together. They fight Bane together, but Bane seems to be handling them with ease. Robin tries everything and it fails in one way or another. It just isn't good enough. Bane tells Robin he fights like a man he once knew, young, raw, untamed and with anger in his heart, and that would be the reason he would die. Batman manages to get a batarang out, nailing Bane in the eye, forcing him to drop the Boy Wonder. Batman gets back in Bane's line of sight and screams at him that that's the last mistake he'd make tonight. He'd already killed Alfred, and he wasn't going to let him kill the Boy Wonder. Bruce walks towards Bane and Dick crawls away in the background, and finally, Bane and Batman get some one-on-one time. It's even for a while. Bruce had grown and Bane had weakened a tad. The pair were level, nothing separating them aside from the raw power Bane had in his corner. Batman would use all he had, but it just wasn't enough to put Bane down. The fight would spill into the manor, and Bruce would have to watch his family's legacy burn down in front of him. His childhood home, his adulthood safe house from the ever-rising tide of criminality. It was all dying in front of him. Batman would be ruthless, fighting with intensity and rage like we'd never seen before. Something Bane would note, but he knew Bane could break him. He was the one man in the world who could. He'd try anything to put Bane down, but it just wasn't working. Bane would tell Batman he could tell he was getting tired. He had been out night after night defending his city, but it was all pointless. He'd been fighting Bane for months without knowing it, and now, while he's in front of him, he fights like this, like an amateur. Bane would slam Batman through the floor multiple times, smack bang into the middle of the cave. Bane would note the upgrades made since he last ripped this place apart. Batman would rip his falling mask off, and Bane would do the same. The two men across the Batwing landing pad from each other, and Bane would start speaking. He'd say that honour isn't something that we warriors adhere to anymore, but we have to, don't we, Bruce? Me and you are special. I've seen how you live. The discipline, the training, the conversations with your butler, the father-to-son talks with your wingless bird. I know what you are, Batman, but I am much worse. I am not a clown playing dress-up. I am not a riddle or a date or a bank robber. I am not a serial killer or a scarecrow. I am the coup de grace you can never have. I am the sleepless nights you face night after night. So, Bruce, come on, show me what your parents died for. Bruce looks back and tells Bane that he talks too much, but Bane injects himself with the experimental venom. He tells Batman that he can't beat him. He has venom now, and that, well, That was Batman's death sentence. He doesn't get bigger or dumber though, he just gets stronger, faster, damn near impervious to pain. This was Batman's death coming up fast. Bruce cracks his knuckles, his ribs bent into his lung. He grasped for air, but none would be found, but he wasn't going down. Not yet, not now. Alfred, Thomas, Martha. If Bruce died now, they'd have died for nothing. Bane rushes at Batman and misses him, and Batman manages to fight back, breaking his bones as he tries to fight back against Bane, but Bane is just too fast. He takes out Batman's left arm. He'd taunt him and tell him he still had one arm left, he just needed to use it wisely. Bruce would spit out some blood and tell him he only needed one arm to beat Bane. Bane says he doubts that and breaks one of Batman's legs. The Dark Knight, now crawling away, would get back to his feet, barely. Bruce would throw a smoke bomb and grapple into the cave's rafters. He tried to use the stealth play again, but Bane finds him. Bane knows him, after all. Bane even mentions that he wouldn't fall into that trap again. He knows Batman's moves, he's fought him before, and he could have killed him before if it wasn't for his own hubris. Bane would tell him he needs to stop this charade, and Batman drops down on him, hurting himself in the process, and Bane just shrugs him off and throws him across the room. He tries everything he can. A batarang is smacked away. Explosive gel would act as nothing more than a slight discomfort. Bruce would be waning. He'd slowly come to the realisation that maybe this is a fight Batman can't win. His gadgets had failed him, his training had failed him, his mind was waning under the pain, and his home was falling around him. Bruce would shut his eyes for what felt like an eternity. He'd see his parents again, and they'd tell him to come into the light. He'd spout out that Bane had killed his family. He talks about honour, but he's a coward, a dirty, weak coward. Bane would move him for the kill, each footstep getting closer and louder than the last. This was it. Bruce's death. Coming up fast. Bruce would throw one more final Hail Mary to slow Bane down, putting a batarang in between his finger and firing a backclaw into Bane's chest, using it to fire himself towards Bane before he'd jam his fist into Bane's face, cutting him open. He'd look over at the remains of the Batcomputer. A picture of his parents and himself lay broken in the wreckage. He'd look at the computer and a look of realisation would dawn across his face. He'd grab his grapnel gun and fire himself over to the computer, while Bane wrangles the gadgets from his body in the background. Bruce would land with a thud. He was so close to the computer. He'd climb up the computer and clamber up it like some sort of desperate animal running away from a tiger, before saying, "Activate Nightfall. Confirmation code, Martha." A 15-second countdown would begin, and Bane would be on his way. One jump would see him over at Batman's side. Bane would pick Batman up and tell him this was it. He'd beaten the great Batman in his own home. Batman would say he hadn't beaten him yet, and Bane would laugh. He'd tell Batman he can't win now, it's over. And Batman tells him he isn't trying to win anymore. It's too late for that. The cave would begin imploding in on itself, and Bane would look around. He'd tell Bruce he'd chosen a coward's death over an honourable death. Bruce would look at Bane, and his final words would be that Bane had just run out of time. Bane screams in pure anger, and the cave would collapse as the manor caved in on them both, bringing the house down on the Dark Knight and the man who broke the bat, killing them both in the explosion. We'd cut to the outside of the manor as we watched it fall. We'd then cut to Dick Grayson slowly clambering back to his feet, his face all messed up and his armour broken. He'd run towards the manor as it collapsed, screaming for Bruce, his suit in tatters, but he wouldn't give up. The manor would fall and Dick would be too late. He was just too late. We'd see Dick Grayson standing at the rubble of Wayne Manor as GCPD cars came onto the scene. Dick would turn around, see them, and put what was left of his mask back on, before disappearing into the surrounding woodland. We'd cut to 3 years in the future. Dick Grayson would be sat in a coffee shop. He'd get an alert from his phone from Barbara Gordon about a crime taking place in Blüdhaven's entertainment mile. Dick puts his phone in his pocket and we cut to him standing atop a building donning a suit, incorporating elements of the Batsuit and his old Robin suit, but it was darker, more blunt. He'd put his mask on, smirk, showing that he hadn't lost his charm, then leap off the building and glide down towards the crime. Maybe it was his destiny to do this. Maybe he could still make a difference. He could bring hope to a small child who'd lost their parents. Maybe Bruce Wayne's memory wouldn't be that of a violent death at the hands of his true arch-nemesis, but a memory of hope, of a better tomorrow. And that is how I envision the Arkhamverse going if Bane never lost his memory. Arkham Origins Bane is definitely Arkham Batman's most dangerous foe, and I think firmly that Bane would have killed him if he had not forgotten Bruce's identity. Obviously, this would mean Bruce would have absolutely nowhere to hide, and ultimately, even with Robin, I think it only goes one way. If I were to ever continue this story, which I won't, I'd have Dick be very affected by these events, but sort of use it as a launching pad to become his own Batman. I'm not suggesting he actually becomes Batman, but he'd become a symbol of hope in Blüdhaven. He'd become that Batman-like figure that people see and know is there to save them. And I'd try and turn it into some sort of redemption arc for Dick, that he would be greatly affected by these events, and obviously this would dull down his usually happy-go-lucky personality, but he wouldn't turn into some brooding freak. He'd still be Dick Grayson, but he'd have to find himself again after these events. I also think this would mean the opportunity to introduce other Robins would be very interesting, because, Dick Grayson is usually Robin, so if you bring in another Robin, it's like a Robin training a Robin, and yeah, I think that could be really interesting. I do think Dick Grayson would bring partners in to bring them onto the right path, much like Bruce did for him. The idea of this series is to really have some fun with the Arkhamverse, and write some really fun, different, and sometimes batshit insane stories, and I hope this keeps you entertained. Let me know what you think, and thank you to Brman for the idea. If you have any ideas for a future episode of Arkham Elseworlds, let me know down below, and I'll see what I can do. Thank you all for watching, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Love you all, and stay safe out there.